But hello, my name is Rob Taylor from Dads in Business, where we aim to have conversations in spaces like this to help support busy working dads bring the best of themselves to home and to work. As part of that, we talk to business leaders, sector experts, specialists in the field around leadership and coaching and personal development to talk about important topics that are relevant to us busy working dads. And today, I'm delighted that we've invited along, and he said yes, George Bell to discuss all around mental health in the workplace, what employers can do, and how we as busy working dads can manage that a bit better ourselves as well. George, welcome along. Who are you? What do you do? And how do you do it? Fill us in.
Hey Rob, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so my name is George. I'm the Senior Brand and Marketing Manager at a company called Sanctus, and we are a coaching provider. So we're a workplace wellbeing benefit. And the way we work is we partner with businesses and then provide those businesses with coaches. So we've got a team of fully qualified professional coaches. And through that, we can basically give the employees at the businesses we partner with a one-to-one space, confidential space, to work on their mental health, their well-being, their growth, their personal development with a professional. We do workshops and talks and kind of group spaces as well, but really that one-to-one space is our thing. That's our bread and butter. Yeah, we just believe, you know, people don't always get the space that they need or deserve, and we want to give people that space to talk, whatever it might be. So it's, you know, it's not necessarily just mental health. It could be growth, it could be career challenges, it could be that public speaking gig coming up, troubles with your relationship, whatever it is. I mean, it's all, you know, it's all intertwined. But that's what we do in a nutshell.
Yeah, brilliant, nice one, and it's great to have you along. And George, I was wondering, it's fascinating around the coaching side of things. I was wondering why do you do what you do? Why are you such a champion of mental health awareness, I guess specifically in your space? What is it that drove you into that field?
Yeah, me personally.
Yeah,
yeah.
Why is it you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like many people in this field, I had my own struggles with my mental health about, I think it's about 8 years ago now. So just coming out of my final year of uni, I didn't know at the time, but I was really struggling with depression and anxiety. I didn't know that was the thing, but yeah, looking back, obviously, I know that now. And yeah, it was just a horrendous journey that was prolonged by a bunch of stuff like societal pressure. I felt I had to be a certain way. I felt I couldn't talk about it. When I then got to the point where I felt like I did need help and did need support, I didn't know where to look. It wasn't easy to access. You know, I've already said I didn't know what was going on for me, so I didn't even have the knowledge or the language to be able to kind of, yeah, I guess like diagnose myself. So for a year, really, I was like scrambling around, like trying to figure out what was going on, or not talking about it, or not opening up. And yeah, it just really prolonged my journey and made me, well, yeah, worse than I needed to be, and much more ill than I needed to be. So I think, you know, eventually I found the support that I needed for myself, and I got better. But I think that whole period of just, yeah, struggle just really sort of lit a fire in my belly to want to do something a little bit different. And yeah, I think, you know, more than anything, I think to encourage people that it's okay to talk, because I think that was really the thing that held me back for a long time in my own journey. It was that I thought if I opened up, that was it. That was the end of my life. People were going to desert me, and I was going to be shunned, and I was never going to get a job, and all the rest of it. Once I opened up, you know, none of that stuff happened, and things got a lot easier for me. But I remember that fear of what could happen is what stopped me opening up. So that's really at the heart of like my own passion, is just, yeah, just encouraging people that, yeah, to talk. Like, it's not always easy. It's still not easy now for me. I have periods when I still struggle, and it's still difficult for me to open up. I still get the sweaty palms and the beating heart, but I know now that the outcome doesn't have to be scary, and often there's a good other side to it. So I think that's really at the heart of, yeah, my own passion, is not wanting people to go through things alone, whether that's good or bad. You know, we should be able to open up on everything across the mental health and wellbeing spectrum.
I agree, and thank you for sharing a bit about your background. I mean, I think one of the things when I first started working for myself and going self-employed is and becoming a dad for the first time, it's bloody hard. And I think sometimes people assume that as men, potentially, I guess, for the context of this discussion, is we can sweep it under the carpet, we just carry on, you man up, get on with it, carry on, what you're moaning for, you can't show weakness. But I think increasingly, I guess, which is promising side, is we are all right to put a hand up and say, you know, this is bloody hard.
Yeah.
It's a simple concept, but not necessarily easy to do because of stigmas and perceptions around it. So
I agree. I think also, you know, people don't believe that their problems are enough, or what they're going through is worthy of talking about or opening up on. I think, you know, you've already said there, you know, becoming a dad, for example, or starting your own business. I think it's very easy for people to go through big life moments, or you know, or even small life moments that and it's hard and it's tough and it causes you stress and anxiety and sleepless nights. But people kind of talk themselves down from opening up on it because they think it's not worthy of a conversation. Who cares? I don't want to be seen as weak, whatever it is. Whereas, you know, these are all things that, you know, we all deserve the space to be able to talk about what's going on in our lives, because it might not be big to someone else, but it could be big to us.
Yeah, it's I like the line of people don't believe their problems are enough. I can certainly resonate with that. And when I've spoken to employers or sort of community operations locally in Sheffield, or sort of more broadly across the UK, they try and bundle men's mental health or dad's mental health and well-being into the more general well-being pot. And I often say to them, well, if you create a well-being space for everyone, I won't come and I won't engage it, because I'll feel that my problems aren't relevant, and I'll almost, you know, stand back and let everyone else do the talking. So we're not actually getting anything addressed whatsoever. You've got to create spaces specifically designed for men and dads who can come and talk about men and dad stuff. It's the same concept, just a different sort of language that's used, if you like. And a big thing is like permission, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen that. It's like, just give permission for people to speak, create the space, and almost like the floodgates open and everyone gets on great. I've been in rooms where there's groups of strangers who have literally never met each other before, and they're telling each other their darkest secrets. It's incredibly powerful. Do you see that happen in your field of work?
Yeah. I mean, we used to do a lot of community events. We haven't well, we couldn't during COVID, and we haven't really got back to it yet, but we are looking to do it because, yeah, we saw the same thing. Like we'd run storytelling nights, and we'd get people in from all walks of life to talk about things that they've been through, or experiences they've had. You know, it's not necessarily just about mental health per se. Like, you know, people might come in and talk about diversity or sexuality or whatever it is, and the link between that and their mental health and the impact it's had. And you just always see, like, at the end, people put their hands up, and it's they say me too, but they always, as you say, it's seeing someone else that you can relate to, or someone open up on the thing that you're going through, and realizing that you're not alone and you're not crazy, you're not weird. All these things kind of people beat themselves up with. I think you can sort of get to the place where you think, only I'm going through this, and if I talk about it, no one else is going to understand. But actually, like you say, you see someone open up, and that gives you the permission to then open up, and you realize it's okay to struggle with this thing. It's okay to talk about this thing. So I think permission is so important, and there's so many ways you can do that. It could be like an event, it could be a storytelling night, it could be I write a lot on LinkedIn, for example, about things I go through, because again, that's another way of kind of granting people permission. But it could be as simple as just texting your mate or a friend and saying, how you doing? Like, do you want to chat? So I think, yeah, there's a lot of ways to give people permission, but I think that's the bit that removes the fear that people have of what could happen when they open up on their mental health, which is generally a lot scarier in their own heads than what it actually turns out to be.
Yeah. And you mentioned somewhere in your introduction that your sort of mental health issues, which you needed to address, and I think a big part of it sounds a big part of what the work you do, and certainly what Dads in Business is trying to aim to do, is more perhaps prevention than the cure. Because if you've identified you have got an issue, it's almost gone too far. And there are others that are far better placed than myself to be mental health practitioners, but just by creating that space, giving that permission, blokes and men and dads, they talk about these topics that are otherwise brushed as this big well-being thing. But if you just phrase it in a different way, like you were saying, storytelling, experiences, lived experiences of me, they find commonalities in that they can connect to quite easily, don't they? And it's just, I guess, by destigmatizing it in a way and bringing the conversation earlier, we're preventing the problems down the road because conversations have happened. And I see on your website that Sanctus tries to normalise that conversation around mental health, which is super. It stuck out to me from your website when I also did some research sort of pre-COVID and during COVID and after COVID that suggested, and this is Fatherhood Institute research, that suggested that 80% of working dads feel that there's less support available to them than their mom counterparts. Now, I always have to preface this by saying I'm not saying there shouldn't be support for moms, but there has to be more or equal support for the working dads, especially if we go for equality, doesn't there? And I just wondered if that was something that you see in your space where there is a gap in provision, and what that is, why is it, and how can we start to address it?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think when it comes to I think in some ways men, or support for men, still lags behind with certain support structures. Like, you know, for example, there's still a conversation, or it's still common that men get less parental leave after a newborn than the mother, right? When, you know, there should be parity there. So I think there's definitely areas where, yeah, support for men lags behind kind of equality and where it should be. And I think a lot of it still stems from this sort of ingrained belief that we have, like men place on themselves and society places on society, that men getting support is a sign of weakness, and they're just meant to be tough, and they're meant to power through these things. And, you know, why do they need so many weeks or months off when they have a newborn? They should just get back to it. I think this is the sort of ingrained belief that has been placed on men that I think is taking time to undo. And I do think we're getting there. I do think that support is getting better for men, and these conversations, that there's much greater conversation around equality now. But I think it takes time, because it's not a you know, click the fingers overnight job done. It's a generational thing, really. Like a lot of this stuff we're talking about here, you know, like I think my grandparents, they don't understand half of what I say to them about what I do, because they just don't. They've been brought up for decades believing something different, so they just don't see it. And you know, probably even my parents to a degree as well. So I think we're trying to undo like decades, centuries probably of like in ingrained belief. You know, thankfully it's not something we see so much in specifically with our work, like at Sanctus. I think it's, you know, we're open to anyone of, we try not to see like job title or age or sex or gender or whatever. It's just people. We just see people. It's a space of people. Obviously there's obviously nuances to that, but yeah, I definitely know, yeah, there's inequality for men in certain areas, inequality for women in other areas. But I do agree that I think support for men lags behind it where it should be in other areas.
I've mentioned many a time on conversations like this where I remember when I first I became a dad for the first time. I was 29. I was still in employment at the time, so I got my 2 weeks off, and then you go back, and it's almost like you've had a holiday, and they say, "Oh, welcome back. You're ready to get back to work." It's like, I've not slept in 2 weeks. I've just gone through a very traumatic experience. I've got no idea what the heck I'm doing, but yeah, of course I'm ready to get back to work. I'll just carry on like nothing's happened, and that can't just be me that gets that. And I think it's probably an unwritten thing. I don't know if it's like you said about your grandparents, it might be a generational thing. I mean, are you seeing in your experience and what your organization's seeing, is there traditional businesses who struggle to embrace this, or are people becoming more aware of it as a legitimate concern, or are there more popular sort of equality things to tick off first?
I think, do you mean that, is there a certain type of business that, like a certain type of
so like traditional crusty old type where it wasn't like this in my day, so just get on with it. Do you see that happen?
Yes, I think it's the short answer. We've been around for 6 or 7 years now, and when we started, pretty much the only people we ended up working with were young, cool, startup-y type businesses in London. Like they got it. They just understood it. Like intuitively they knew that this was a good thing to invest in and the right thing to do. We didn't really work with, I probably missed a couple of partners, but we didn't really work with any large, big corporates. And yeah, plenty of stories that we have, and I know from other wellbeing businesses as well, of them, pretty much getting laughed out of boardrooms and stuff when they try to sell this stuff. That's changed now, and I think we work with some fantastic businesses across all sizes, from small startups to corporates. But I do think that there are certain industries and probably certain size businesses where it's not everyone. So this is a bit more generally speaking, but generally it is slower to move. Like when it comes back to the generational thing, it's similar in these big corporates, been around for many years, again decades, maybe hundreds of years. There's generally a certain type of person, probably, or people in the boardroom or at a leadership level. So it's just, again, it's trying to undo all of these old ways of doing, these old ways of being, these old beliefs. And there's so much to this to the conversation that I think it just takes time. Like I think coming back to the parental thing again, I think that's a really good example, because the way people have this conversation, it probably stops at the level of, oh, the parents are tired. That's probably, when it comes to talking about new parents and mental health, probably the only, as far as people can go with it, is, oh yeah, the parents aren't really sleeping, so they're obviously knackered. But actually, I'm sure you can speak to some of this. Becoming a new parent can bring up so much. Like you've obviously got a new child in your life. There's probably some, well, I know there is for some parents, there's like resentment that their partner is now spending more time with the baby than with them. They're feeling maybe a bit jealous. They're feeling maybe guilty. They're not round enough. A dad, for example, is probably struggling, but feels that they can't talk about it because the mother has been through perhaps more, quote unquote, with the birth of the child. So they hide their own feelings. They feel guilt. So all of if you just think there's all these different emotions and scenarios and situations at play, and this is just around one thing, becoming a new parent. So if you take all the different things that happen to people in life, new careers or grief or moving house or a pet's died or they've fallen out with a friend, all the different emotions and feelings that come up, it's just a big complicated conversation when it comes to mental health. And I think we're all still learning. Like I've been in the space for a long time. I'm still learning about myself, my own mental health, and mental health at a more macro level. So I just think it takes time. It just takes time, and it's not top of some businesses' agendas really. I believe it should, and I can probably argue that to the cows come home. But yeah, I think it just takes time, and I do genuinely believe we'll get there. I think pretty much every business knows they need to do something about it now. Some maybe not doing it for the right reasons. Could be a tick box exercise. Could just be an employer branding exercise. That's a whole other thing. I don't agree with that. But I do believe everyone knows that they need to do something now. I think it's going to take time for everyone to realize that it's the right thing to do. I think some businesses are doing it because, oh, well, we found that it does return on investment, or it will help us hire better talent, rather than probably coming at it like, no, this is just like morally, this is a good thing to do and the right thing to do.
Interesting. I was scribbling some notes down here, George, because you've touched on a lot there that I think we could probably unpack a little bit more. I mean, one of those would be, how do we measure it? Absolutely. So I'd like to address that if you don't mind. You mentioned something about box ticking. I'm curious about your experiences of that, speaking to employers or being in the field of which you're an expert there. Do you see companies using it as a box ticking exercise? We do it because we feel we have to, i.e. there are international mental health awareness days. Could that in a way cause more offence or struggle? I get these days are well intended, but mental health isn't just a day, is it? So how does that play out? And I guess, how do you encourage companies to overcome it, not just as a box ticking exercise, but is something that needs to play out in their culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of businesses, like, yes, a lot of businesses do just tick boxes for, for one of the reasons maybe we've said. It could be just a revenue thing or an employer branding thing, or they hear their people talking about it and they're like, oh, let's just do it. It will help us retain talent. What we always say, and the trouble with it, and this is, the argument we have for businesses who think this, is that it will not work long term. Like, you could bring in all of the mental health and well-being benefits in the world, but if your people know you're just bringing it in for a box ticking exercise, and they can see through all the bravado and the bullshit, which they will, by the way, like, people can sniff this out, you're not really building a culture where mental health is supported, and people will still feel unsupported. So you could bring in, for example, you could bring in Sanctus, right? You could bring in this one-to-one confidential coaching space. But if leadership are criticizing it, or still telling people that it's, weak to speak or anything, like, if there's a culture that doesn't support trust and vulnerability and struggle and opening up and psychological safety, then people won't use the services that you're bringing in, and they won't trust it. So they're still not getting the support that they need and deserve. So I think, companies think they could just box tick and then that's it. Their employer branding score goes up and they'll keep their talent. Actually, if you really want to build a company that supports mental health and wants to keep people, you have to start. There's kind of like fundamental building blocks you have to start with, and that comes back to some of the stuff I was just saying around psychological safety or trust. Like, do your managers check in on their team's well-being? Do they actually mean it? Do they give them space to open up? Do employees feel like they can open up and they're not going to be sacked? Those are the building blocks to then build mental health and well-being services on top of it. Obviously, a lot of companies don't want to do that because that's the psychological safety stuff. It's harder and it's messier and it's stickier, and they don't really get it or agree with it or whatever it might be, or don't understand it. And that's not a complete criticism, by the way. Like, it's quite, meaty, complex stuff, this, and it takes time to learn that. But ultimately, if you do just try and tick a box, it might work in the short term, it won't work in the long term. You'll still lose people and there'll still be churn and people will still struggle, because ultimately the message that will be coming to them is, we don't really care about your well-being. Here's a benefit you can use, but we don't really believe that you should be using it or it's the right thing to do.
No, and just going back to the sort of generational thing where we suggested that it's more traditional industries that might not embrace it. Are you seeing on the flip side of that, where the generational employees, the future workforce, the Gen Zs, I guess, well, I'm a millennial, so I've got 3 kids now. So Gen Zs are probably at the age now where they could start having kids as well. They're starting to choose employers based around values and morals and ethics. Do you think this will play a part in the future workforce? I'm going to work there because they look after their people. I'm going there because they've got this program. Do you think that's going to start playing out in a meaningful way soon?
100%. I think we really started seeing this during the pandemic. So McKinsey and company they did a lot of really good research and studies around during the pandemic. I think they did a couple, and I mean, you've probably seen, or people have probably listening probably seen terms thrown around like Great Resignation and things like that, talent wars. I think the pandemic really ignited this fuse it's like a tinderbox for a lot of people, and suddenly, people were at home. I mean, this is generally speaking. This obviously isn't everyone in every role, but generally speaking, people were at home more with their loved ones or their family, or they had more time for their hobbies or walking, whatever it was. So that was a big thing. That kind of changed the relationship that many people had with their work and their office. But it was also a really difficult period for people mentally, whether they realize it or not. But we were essentially like confronted with like death, our own like mortality, which sounds pretty deep, but that is the message people are getting every day, watching the news every day, and it was death, it was the death figures. And I think when you're kind of confronted with your own mortality in that way, which we're not really in the UK generally, or the West, it's you start to think more about your own life and your purpose and what do you want, and people went on a lot of people went on a big introspective exercise during the pandemic, and they were just like, is this my purpose? Is this what I want to do? Does my business really care about me? Do I want to spend the rest of my life here? And then I think they started to see that actually maybe their workplace wasn't supporting them in the best way. So I think people really reevaluated whether they wanted to stay where they were and their working life. And I don't know what the latest figures are, but I know when I first looked at the McKinsey report, it was something like 50 to 60. They found that 50 to 60% of employees, it was something around that, at least 50% were at least considering leaving their jobs within the next 6 months, which is crazy when you think about it. And I think I read that some sort of disengagement report. It was something like, I think it was only about 10, 15% of the global workforce are actively engaged in their job. So something like 85, 90% of people are only somewhat engaged or are disengaged, which again is crazy when you think how much time you spend at work. So I think the pandemic was big. I think that changed a lot of people's relationships with work. And then I don't know how it's going to play out, but I've seen a lot of people say how we're yet to see the full impacts of it yet. I think people have gone through these sort of soul searching exercises. I think a lot of people are weighing up their options now. I do genuinely think that people are weighing up their options. I think some people probably aren't going to make any knee-jerk moves because they're probably looking at, fuel crisis, war, inflation. Let's stay here while I'm getting paid a salary. But I do think we will see what has happened during the pandemic and what was kind of building up to that before that, play out now over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I think a lot of people will move because people, gone are the day, again, come back to the generational thing, people just looked for a paycheck really, and it was very much an employer's market. It's much more of a employees market now. There's generally speaking, more vacancies open than there are candidates. People are looking for purpose, they're looking for support, they're looking for a place that genuinely cares about them beyond just a pay packet.
Yeah, it does seem to. I mean, I work for myself, so I don't see that shift in a workplace environment so much. But certainly, with the networks that we're in and the business, it keeps coming up about the Great Resignation. Was it really a thing? Is it really a thing? But the reading and research that we've done around the generational shift suggests that those future employees, need and want to feel more purpose in their employment. They need and want to feel supported and looked after, and an appreciation that it's more than just a job. And I guess hybrid working might put some pressures on that. When work is home and home is work, you need to be supported in that too. I keep seeing this word quiet quitting as well. Is that something that you're experiencing? I'm not saying you're experiencing quiet quitting, but is quiet quitting a thing you've seen play out what is that? Explain that to us.
Yeah, it's just it's slightly weird, but I don't really like the phrase that much personally. It took off on, I think it took off on TikTok, and it's one of these, it's the latest kind of buzzword and trend that's just exploded. The way the quiet quitting is defined as, in the sense that it's in the way it's taken off recently, is if people are doing things like not emailing after hours, or not working after hours, not going the extra mile. That is what has generally been defined as quiet quitting, which I disagree with, and I think a lot of people do, because for a lot of us that we're like, well, that's just healthy working boundaries.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. You shouldn't be shamed if you don't want to email after hours or whatever. So I think the way it's been defined, I don't think it's a good term. I think it's actually quite harmful, really. But I think some of what's intended by the phrase, in that people have lost engagement with their jobs and they've disassociated with it, and they're not as feeling the passion, or they're not as connected to their work. I think that is going on, whether it's quiet quitting or disengagement or whatever. There is a lot of that around at the moment, for some of the reasons that we already spoke about. But I think this has been going on, really since the beginning of time. Like we're just talking about people losing connection with their work or disengagement. There'll always be a new word for it. Like, people getting disengaged from their work is not a new thing. People have probably been doing that right back to caveman time. Like, if you fall out of love with what you're doing, or you don't really see how it fits into your life's purpose, you get disengaged from it. That is part of what quiet quitting is. So it's exploded. you know, it's kind of gone a bit viral, but really I don't want people to get too caught up in it because it's been around forever. Yes, maybe it's more prevalent at the moment with after what's happened with COVID. But yeah, I try not to get too caught up into it. I think what it's just important for people to be aware of how it's coming up for them. Like if they are really disengaged from their work, yeah, is it actually they're just setting healthy boundaries? Like I think if you're not emailing off that's healthy boundaries, or is it actually you have fallen out of love with your work, or the purpose and vision of the company no longer aligns with your own purpose, in which case, you know, it may be time for you to move on and find something else, which it isn't a bad thing. It's often just a sign that, you know, we change, businesses change, our purpose changes. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing what I would assume is presenteeism. Is that what we used to call it? Maybe it's just quiet quitting has a alliterative sound to it, so it's more a hot topic. But like you say, it sounds like that's been going on for forever.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think that it starts with the media often, or we as humans, we like to latch on to the new, cool, sexy things. I don't know if you saw, I think it was 2020 or last year. I mean, all the COVID years have blended into one. But yeah, during COVID, there was this term languishing that did the rounds. Did you see this?
Oh, I didn't. So that sounds like a hot one. Tell me about language.
Yeah, so that exploded, and it was this feeling of or the way it was described, it's like a feeling of disconnection, a feeling of kind of exhaustion and tiredness, and this feeling of like you're at the end of a race, you're at the end of a marathon, and you go in and go in and go in and go, and then once you see the finish line in sight, you allow yourself to get tired, and it was this sort of thing. And that, again, that term exploded. It picked up by all the media articles, is it on the news, everyone was talking about it. It was talked about as though we just discovered this new emotion, this brand new human emotion. It's the same thing with quiet quitting. It's been around forever. It was just another way of talking about burnout or depression or like, you know, tiredness. It was just another word for that. But I think we often kind of go through it. We seem to go through these periods of finding new sexy ways of talking about things. So there will be a new term for quiet quitting this year or next year or whatever, and there'll be a new one for languishing, all the rest of it. So I think, you know, what I just always say is try not to get too caught up in the to people. It's trying to get too caught up in the terms and the phrases going around, but just the emotions behind them have been around forever. And it's just people, you know, important people stay aware of what is coming up for them. Don't get caught up in the kind of the noise of it. Just what's going on.
Words, if you like.
Yeah. What is going on for you? Because that, you know, there will be a new buzzword. Like quiet quitting it has got some long legs at the moment. It's been going on for a while, but that will die out, and there will be a new phrase that people latch onto.
Yeah, and I think just sort of the last one around employers before I ask a couple of bits around, I guess men and dads more specific. But what benefits do you think, or can you offer to employers to better embrace mental health support in the workplace? Why should I? What's in it for me? It sounds like a big cost. What benefits will I see from actually embracing it? I'm not just saying we've done this for a day. There you go. What benefits long term do you see for organisations who actively embrace it as a concept?
Yeah. I mean, there's been studies done which, because we didn't have this a few years ago, so this has been really helpful to the conversation. There's been studies done that show that if you invest in mental health and well-being, and you invest in the support of your people, you will see a return on that investment. So the big one was done by Deloitte. I think it was in 2019, 2020, around then. They found for every £1 that was invested in mental health, a business on average would see £5 returns. Some businesses would see up to, I think it was £11, which, you know, obviously a huge return. So that's the return. And on the flip side, there's been studies and stats done on the huge cost to businesses for poor mental health, and people going off for poor mental health, or people leaving. Again, I think it's the same Deloitte report. They've kind of worked out the figures, so you can work out, depending on where you're based in. This is in the UK, based in the UK, and the size of your business, you can work out how many thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds you're losing a year. Yeah, based on your company size and location, or, you know, it could even be millions. So that, you know, we do have the stats and the data and the studies around that now to put revenue cost to mental health and not investing in it, or investing in it, which, you know, ultimately that is what it's going to come back to, right? For businesses, businesses have to think about profit and the bottom line. So that is there. But then I think also, you know, you want to build a place that people genuinely want to come to. You want to attract the best talent. You want that talent to stay. You want them to be invested in their work, and you want them to be the best they can be, to do the best work they can do, both so they feel fulfilled and so your company can grow. And, you know, coming back to what we've already spoken about, this is what people are looking for now. This is what the top talent is looking for, or any, you know, any talent. I shouldn't just say top. And it's what people deserve, really. Like people now expect their workplace to look after them and to support them beyond just a salary. Like that just doesn't cut it anymore. The conversation is only going to go further down that route. People are only going to go want more from workplaces. And, you know, I think, you know, some people maybe think that the young now are too demanding or fluffy, quote unquote, or, you know, snowflakes. I see these terms thrown around, but, you know, I think people spend a huge portion of their working lives, or of their lives, at work. So, you know, I think it's fair to ask that they are supported in their work, for them to be able to live the best life they can, and for them to do the best work they can. So yeah, I think really that is the argument for businesses, that if you want to, you know, attract the best talent, retain them, and, you know, also help that bottom line grow, then you will have to think about and invest in mental health and well-being.
And if there's a 500% uplift, which is what the Deloitte, it's not just anyone saying this is Deloitte, £1 equals £5 output. That's, yeah, you're right. You have to put it somewhere as a hard return on investment, don't you? Because if not, it would sound like a nice idea that's easy to get rid of. If there's an actual tangible benefit to your workforce and your organisation because of it, that's about 1 to 5, 1 in 5 out. That's not a bad
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah, and you know, I think some businesses think that they can just ignore the conversation and then it won't happen. But, you know, it's just like, that's just fantasy land. Like, your employees are going to lose people, and they're gonna suffer grief. They might get burnt out. They're gonna have difficult days. They're gonna fall out with partners and friends, and, you know, they're gonna lose money, and all of these things that people, and, you know, and they're gonna go through great things as well. They're gonna have babies, or they're gonna get married, or they're gonna want to get promoted, or they're gonna take up this really cool new hobby. All of these things are going to happen. Employees are going to go through it, and all of these things impact people's mental health and well-being. It brings up, as we already said earlier, it brings up a lot of emotions and feelings for people. Businesses ignoring this, it doesn't make it go away. These things are still going to happen. So actually, businesses that work hard to support their people through all of these life's moments, good and bad, are going to be the ones that get the trust and the loyalty of those employees for these things that are going to happen anyway. And stop, you know, it's going to stop them, or, you know, it could stop them. It might, you know, might help to stop them looking elsewhere for that support.
No, it makes a real good point. I think there is a lot, I guess, pressuring all of us, isn't there, in the workplace, outside of the workplace. And I'd be interested, you know, talk about employers, park those, the employees, the men and the dads, I guess, specifically for the context of this conversation, with the external pressures that we can't do anything about, but they're happening. It seems that, you know, if lockdown and pandemic was the first time we were in sight of our own mortality, there seems to be one thing every week these days that's challenging our position and our perception of the world and our impact in it, I guess. What are you seeing as emerging themes in those people that are speaking to you on like a one-to-one level? What are the themes emerging? Because we see rises in anxiety and guilt, in overwhelm, bit of confusion, I guess, lack of focus, boundaries being eroded. What are you seeing? What are the men and dads telling you in your workplaces and conversations that you're having?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that sorry, I think that, you know, we have, as you say, we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot the last couple of years, and, you know, it's been stormy and bumpy, and there's still a bit of, you know, still storm on the horizon. Really, we've moved from pandemic into war and inflation and fuel crisis and all that kind of stuff, and it has been a massive period of uncertainty and transition, and we're still transitioning. People are still feeling uncertain about the future, And I think that brings up a lot. I think that's what we're seeing a lot in our sessions. It's this feeling of uncertainty or burnout from, you know, the prolonged pandemic and everything that came with it, and stress and anxiety, and for some people that's playing out as lack of motivation as well. We hear a lot about lack of motivation or lack of purpose. So I think that is where a big portion of the conversation is at the moment. It's this general feeling of uncertainty and unrest and stress and like burnout and loss of motivation. I think it's, you know, it's really important to say that, because, you know, I'm feeling some of that at the moment. I know some of my friends are, I know other people are. And coming back to that permission piece, it feels important to say that, because I hope anyone listening who is feeling that, does resonate with that, can be like, right, it's not just me. This is the general feeling at the moment. Doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the fuel crisis is fixed or the war stops, and those things will still be going on and we'll still be feeling those things. But yeah, hopefully people can realize that it's not just them at the moment. Because I mean, those are the overwhelming themes we're seeing. Like, you know, for a pre-pandemic, we'd see a lot of the same stuff, but it wasn't as heavily weighted to one side. Whereas I think at the moment, in the current climate and what we've all been through, there's a lot of the similar themes coming up.
It seems so, and you're right. You know, it's not just you. It's not just that person. It's hard to take that on. It really tests the resilience and the focus. And like I said, burnout's probably more prevalent. And I think, just as we start to wrap this up, George, on that note from the trends that are emerging, if there were to be sort of 3 quick wins or 3 things we can start to do practically to I guess implement ourselves without having to engage our employer or anything, what can we do to, I guess, check in with burnout, lack of focus, perk ourselves up if we're feeling a bit demotivated? What do you suggest we can start to do to practice that? This is a positive bit of takeaways for us.
Yeah, first thing to do, I'd say, is pay attention to what's going on in your body. So generally, and I'm speaking to myself, I'm about this, but you know, generally humans are we're very much in the head. We think a lot. It's easier to think, but actually our body is the greatest source of information we have in our lives, and we feel things in our body before we have been able to think about them. So whatever's happening with your mental health, whether it's joy and happiness, or it's grief, sadness, burnout, anxiety, whatever it is, you'll feel it in your body before you're able to even think about it. So the more aware you can become of what's going on in your body, the better. And that, you know, I know when I was first learning about this concept, it can be it can feel a bit wishy-washy, and it can feel really spiritual, and you know, people want to detach from that, but it doesn't have to be like that. It's just simply paying attention to what's in your body. So that thing you're anxious about, you'll probably feel it in your gut, or you'll feel it in your sweaty palms before you're able to think about it. So that it's just good to keep checking in with yourself, because that's how you'll know, or you'll be able to know if something's a bit off kilter for you. Are you just tired, or are you burnt out? Those are kind of good questions you can start asking yourself when you're paying attention to your body. Then I think if you have some sort of reflective practice, which could be, you know, going for a walk. You know, people get to different places. It could be going for a walk without your phone. Could be standing in the shower. Journaling is a great one. If you just start freeform writing, whether on your phone or with a pen, without thinking about it, just have a reflective practice that free of distractions. If you are going for a walk, try not to be on your phone unless that's where you want to kind of jot your thoughts down. But just having some sort of reflective practice, again, you can just see what comes up. What are you thinking about? What are you dwelling on? What questions are you asking yourself? What thing are you putting off? What are you worrying about? That's just another way you can see what's going on for your mental health. And then I think, you know, another good kind of practice, and then, you know, something to help it is talk to someone about it. Scheduling time to talk to someone about it. Doesn't have to be an employer. Doesn't have to be a professional. It can just be a friend, family member, partner, loved one. Doesn't have to be formal. Doesn't have to be scary. Just kind of arrange a time to just check in with each other and just ask, like, how are you doing? Like, how are you really doing? What's going on for you at the moment? Just you know, start talking about some of the things that are going on in your life, some of the things you're worried about, some of the things you're not sure on. Get an opinion. I think these things are, as we kind of said earlier, you know, they are generally a lot scarier in our heads than they turn out to be in practice. And I still find it hard talking about some things myself, but I generally always feel better every time I've opened up. Might not fix the problem. There might be something I've still got to work on, so it might not be easy. But that saying, problem shared is a problem halved, I do think it really has legs. So those are kind of three things you can do to check in on yourself, check what's going on for you, ask yourself a few questions, and then have someone to talk to about it.
That's brilliant. That's really helpful, because I think we can try and jump to solution, like offering solutions for everything. And you're right, we can't solve everything. No matter what I talk about or do, isn't going to solve inflation tomorrow. That's not that's not the idea of what you're suggesting here. Is to make awareness, I guess. Like I say, a problem shared is a problem halved, and the weight off your shoulders. So I think there's three good practical tips there. And I'm a demon for the second one. We say about reflective practices. Go for a walk. I do that. I just need to do it without my phone, because the amount of times I can refresh my emails. But the problem is, I have my Audible books and my Spotify on my phone, so you can't escape them. So I just need a
well, I think what's also important, I should say, is like, don't, make sure you do all this stuff free of judgment. I think we're always so harsh on ourselves that we are our own biggest critic. So it's easy for you to like beat yourself up now and say, oh, I use my phone too much. So if you love going for walks with Spotify or Audible or texting your mates, and that is a break for you and a release for you, and you enjoy doing that, don't put pressure on yourself or beat yourself up if you don't do that. Just find another time for a reflective practice. So maybe it is that you go for a walk with Audible, but then in the evening you set aside 10 minutes to journal, and you put your phone away for 10 minutes and you just write on a piece of paper. So I think I think that's how often people can beat themselves up trying to get into these certain ways of being or these certain practices. It just makes them feel worse because they feel like they're not doing the things they want to do. So I think it's really important to approach this stuff with, be kind to yourself, and don't judge yourself, don't beat yourself up. I think you can only try your best with yourself, and you've got to find what works for you.
Yeah, George, that's brilliant, mate. How can people find you and the work that you do with Sanctus? Tell us about where we can connect, because you're very active on LinkedIn for a start, aren't you? So where can we find you and the work you do?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. I try to post every day on mental health and well-being. So yeah, please do follow me there. And yes, I'm George Bell on Sanctus on LinkedIn, and then for Sanctus, our website is sanctus.io, so you can find out more about us there. And we also post regularly on LinkedIn from the Sanctus page as well.
Super. Well, I'll be finding her. If you could share with me those links from Deloitte and McKinsey that you mentioned, that'd be great, because it'd be great for resources to go along with this video. But this will be posted on the Dads in Business website, YouTube, LinkedIn, no doubt, all the platforms. But most importantly, just share it, get the conversation going. Problem shared is a problem halved. George, it's been a pleasure talking to you, mate. Thank you very much for spending this time with us. It's been really helpful and insightful. So appreciate your time, and keep up your good work, buddy. We'll be in touch again soon.
Cool, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Nice one. Cheers, George.
Cheers.